it shouldn't be a repository. It shouldn't be an afterthought. It shouldn't be something. It's not just an archive. It's actually it's a goldmine of information that we should be using in our day-to-day lives when we're managing our clinical trials. So stop thinking about it as an afterthought. Stop thinking about it as this thing that you just file away and then forget about. There's a lot of value in TMF, and we really should be exploiting it.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the State of TMF. For those that don't know me, I'm Danny Gold. I'm account executive here at Montrium, but it's okay. Don't worry if you don't know me. The person that you should know over here is sitting right next to me. This is Fenton-Carter, the president and CEO of Montrium and the incoming co-chair of the State of TMF reference model. So welcome everybody to the another episode of the State of TMF. We're doing an AMA here with Paul, and Paul, I'll let you intro yourself a little bit for those that don't know you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Danny. So great to be here again. I think this is probably my 20th episode or something that I've done on State of TMF over the last couple of years. This episode is a bit different. We're just answering various different random questions, but really good questions that we got from the audience. I know that the team reached out to the community before today's session to try and get some questions. So yeah, I'm ready to be quizzed. And looking forward to it.
Amazing. Well, without further ado, let's get into our first question. And so, Paul, how do you think the role of the TMF manager will change over the next few years? And what skills do you think we should focus on learning?
That's a good one. It's something I've been thinking about for a while, and especially as we're embarking on this sort of whole new journey around version 4 of the TMF reference model and sort of moving to a much more digital standard. I definitely think things are going to change in relation to the TMF. We're sort of going much more towards data and going away from documents. And as we go towards data, it sort of means that we need a slightly different skill set. In the past, when we were sort of managing paper and then sort of electronic documents, our skill set was very much focused on archiving and building repositories of documents. I think that's changing. I think that moving forward, we're going to have to manage data. And so, in the beginning of my career, I worked a lot in clinical data management and biostats. And that was really where I started in the clinical trial world. And clinical data management, there's a very specific process that we have to follow. We have to sort of define, well, what data do we need to be able to collect all of the clinical data required for the protocol. And then afterwards, we collect the data and then we have to clean it. So we have to make sure that the data is solid before we do our analysis of the clinical trial. And so in TMF, there's a lot of parallels. Like we need to do the same thing. We need to specify, well, what data do we need to tell the story of the study? And then afterwards, how do we clean that data? How do we make sure that that data is complete, that it's of sufficient quality, that we have traceability, all of the different things that we typically look for when we're dealing with data quality. And so that's where I think things are going to change, because up until now, we've focused a lot on sort of just doing this initial QC when we index documents and upload documents into the system. I think we're going to have to start to think about data management techniques that we can apply. So building out, for example, automated logical checks on the information that we have in the TMF, or even sort of doing sort of assisted automated checks using artificial intelligence, for example, to be able to detect anomalies not only within the artifacts themselves, but also across artifacts. So if there are things that don't quite make sense in relation to our processes or into the sequence of things, if we have issues around versioning, all these different things that we should be looking for, we can start to build out more sort of technical tool sets to be able to better detect all of those issues up front. And to do that, you need kind of a data management mindset. So I think the TMF managers of the future are actually going to be TMF data managers. So they're going to perform data management type techniques to achieve our goals. And I think that's a pretty pretty big shift, pretty big mindset change. But I think it's coming and we need to prepare for it.
And so with all that being said, like, is there any like sort of new data that you think people should be tracking, or any like skills that people should be honing, in preparation for that new role?
I mean, I would start to think about what are the kinds of checks, the kind of logical checks we would want to be doing to be able to detect anomalies. And as we start to see tool sets emerge from vendors, we're going to need to develop those skills to be able to develop those checks. So start thinking about that. Start thinking about how would you verify using an edit check type feature, the consistency and the quality of the TMF. It was data driven.
Right. Thank you so much for that answer. So since the release of your white paper earlier this year, how do you think the industry is progressing in adopting a risk-based TMF management? How much further do you think we have to go?
This is a very interesting question. I think we're just at the beginning, in fact, of our risk management journey within TMF. Within clinical, we've actually been doing risk management, things like risk-based monitoring for a while. But when it comes to TMF, it's something that's fairly recent. As you know, Danny, it's now become a requirement in Europe to perform a risk-based approach to TMF management. And I think that just moving forward, in general, everything we do within clinical needs to be risk-based, especially with ICH E6R3 on the horizon. But I do feel that when it comes to TMF, risk-based approach can be quite varied and it can be quite complex. And there are two sort of key white papers that have been released. One that Donatella Ballerini and myself put together last year around a proposed framework for risk-based approach, and this was sort of much more based on the content and the clinical trial itself and what was happening in the clinical trial. And then also within the CDISC TMF reference model, there's also a group focused on risk-based approach. But this is more sort of risk-based approach with regards to TMF management processes. And I think both are actually very relevant. I think that the community is just starting to look at this. And I think right now, risk-based approach is a very manual thing. And I think there are some organizations who are looking at things like study design, what are the higher risk areas of the study, and maybe looking at the study risk assessment, because typically we'll do a study risk assessment, which looks at the overall higher risk areas of the study based on the protocol, and then sort of start to build that into their TMF oversight strategy. So what are they actually going to be looking at throughout the conduct of the trial to make sure that they're looking at the higher risk areas and making sure that they're detecting those issues within those high risk areas. And then I think that there are also companies who are sort of looking at artifacts, for example, and they're sort of going through the list of artifacts within their master index, and they're sort of saying, well, that artifact is higher risk because it relates to a higher risk process. Maybe it relates to patient safety, for example. So they might, okay, well, I need to put more focus on this. In reality, I think that there are many, many, many factors that we should be looking at when developing a more comprehensive risk strategy for TMF management. So those factors could be in relation to the metrics that we're seeing in the system. It could be related to the number of queries, for example, the number of quality issues that we're seeing. It could be related to previous experiences with clinical sites or with countries. It could be related to things like patient recruitment and other metrics that are coming from outside of the TMF system. So there are many, many factors that can really impact the risk of a study and what we should really be looking at when we're performing oversight. And so I think we're at the beginning of the journey. But I think that as we start to become more and more data driven, it's going to be easier because we're going to be able to leverage this data to drive risk calculation algorithms, which in turn will then drive the activities, the management activities for our trial master files. So, long answer to a short question, but I just think that we're at the beginnings of this, but it's going to go quite far.
Well, I think the long answers are what the people want right now, Paul. I think, it's but to follow up though with that, are there any kind of resources aside from the white paper, that we released, is there any kind of resources about risk-based TMF management that you would suggest to maybe those in the crowd that want to look into it more?
Yeah. So I would definitely go and look at, obviously ICH has a number of guidance which include risk-based approach and sort of more general risk-based approaches. So definitely go and look at ICH. There's a lot of information there. I would also say, look at what the CDISC TMF reference model is outputting. Because there is some useful resources there. There's the white paper, but they're also putting together some tools that you can use as well to put in place risk management strategies. And there's also going to be training, I believe, in the future as well. And then just Google it. There are resources out there on risk management process, either generally or within clinical trials. And there are even some historical white papers. There was one white paper, we call it the German white paper, which sort of, because it was written by a group in Germany, that's why. But it basically has they tried to classify the TMF reference model artifacts with a risk classification, which I think is interesting. Obviously, the risk is in the eye of the beholder. So what I may feel is risky may not be risky to you. So it's definitely specific to the organization, and it definitely is specific to just how you've designed as well. So I don't think you can just sort of take it black and white, but it's useful to sort of see their thinking and get that insight. The biggest thing is risk is always a combination of factors. You always have to take into account a combination of factors. It's not just one single that you can use to risk-based approach.
No, for sure. Well, thank you so much for that. Let's move on to question 3 here. So I'll just pull it up on screen. What are your thoughts on the rapid incorporation of AI and the impact they have on TMF management? I know that this is a question that is burning in the crowd.
Yeah, AI is interesting. So around 4 years ago, everyone started talking about AI and the promises of AI and the fact that it was going to be able to do a lot of stuff for us in the TMF world. And I think a lot of the focus was on sort of document identification, being able to identify metadata and extract metadata, being able to perform fairly simplistic Alcoa +++ type checks on artifacts, detecting duplicates, those kinds of things, which was going to promise really the replacement of these big sort of armies of people that end up having to do all of that stuff. I think it has had mitigated success. And in the last sort of year or so, I've spoken at conferences and attended conferences where there's been a lot of discussion around AI, and there's not a huge uptake. And I think people are kind of using a mixture of sort of some basic AI stuff plus a lot of oversight and a lot of human intervention still. When I think about AI, I think that maybe we were focusing on the wrong thing. I think that, of course, you can use it for sort of identifying documents and things like that. But I think that there's so much more value when I think about things like ChatGPT and how you can kind of ask ChatGPT questions, and obviously you have to formulate them well, and it can give you analysis or synthesis of information that it's able to access. And I think that when you think about TMF, it's really like a huge repository of information. And it's quite often so big that it's very difficult to actually analyze it. and the whole. And there's a lot of stuff that we just don't see because it's just too much information. And if we could apply things like ChatGPT, obviously in a controlled way, to our trial master file and start asking questions, typically, if I have this, particular type of study design, am I expected to see out of inclusion exclusion criteria waivers, for example? So it's a very sort of specific question that you could ask. And if your ChatGPT was trained on, all of the different studies that you've run up until now, or maybe it could give you some really interesting insights, and there could even be possibilities of sharing those insights, in a very confidential way across sponsors too. So I think we really should be using AI to help us make better decisions within our clinical programs based on the information that's contained within TMF. And I think that's where we're really going to start to see the value in the future. So even within Montrium, we have obviously an AI program. We're looking at how do we leverage AI, and we've made quite a lot of progress on the classic sort of indexing, duplicate detection, that kind of stuff. We've made good progress, but I think that one of the things that we're really excited about is how can we use sort of natural language processing and things like ChatGPT to actually get more value, and provide more value to our customers. So an interesting area. Watch this space. I think there's a lot of stuff that's gonna evolve in this area.
No, absolutely. And I think it kind of goes hand in hand, like that answer goes hand in hand with your previous one about the TMF manager role kind of changing to a more data management driven position. Like I think we're going to see a lot more like AI tools being utilized in that way to manage data. And I think that's kind of the way it's going.
I just wanted to, I saw that there was a comment as well from Russell. Hey, Russell. Russell's a very knowledgeable person, worked with Russell for many years. Russell, you're right. There could be sort of issues around the use of the information. I think that's what we have to kind of work out. And it may not necessarily be ChatGPT. I'm thinking more about like generative AI in general. And I think, there's definitely constraints. There's definitely things you need to think about when you're using it. And also, you need to make sure that you're not sort of taking it for gospel either, right? You need to take it with a pinch of salt, but it's meant to sort of give you indications that say insights that you then need to obviously go and confirm.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's move on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So question number 4, why is it so difficult to accurately measure completeness, and how can we improve this going forward?
Yeah, this is the holy grail, right? I mean, I think I'm not sure if there's one single answer to this, and I think it's something that we've always struggled with. I think that there are several things that can help us improve completeness calculation. I think things like standardization. So standardization of the TMF reference model, I think, will help. I also think we need to change our approach in the way that we sort of build out our expected artifact lists. So obviously completeness is calculated on your expected artifact lists. And so usually these things are populated either very manually where, you have like a clinical trial master file team who's sort of working with the clinical group and sort of asking, so what's going on in the study? What should we expect? And they're sort of updating this expected artifact list manually. Or there may be some level of intelligence around sort of activity from an event within the study. But I think that to truly solve this issue, we need to have a much better way of defining that expected artifact list, probably based on clinical processes. So taking a much more process-based approach to trial master file management, and even sort of trying to find ways and mechanisms so that we can create instances of processes as they occur, or processes that we expect to occur based on trial design or what's happening in the study. I definitely think that with the coming of digital TMF and things like digital protocols where we can actually access a lot more information around study design and what's occurring within the study, as well as things like digital data flow where we can access activity information that's coming from other systems, we should be able to detect when we need to create instances of processes within our trial master file, and therefore create all of the different placeholders that we would need to document those processes. So I think without, I could spend probably a whole hour talking about this, but I think that the main thing is we need to change our mindset and stop thinking about silos of paper and think more about clinical trial processes and how we document those processes.
Sure. And so Russell actually just asked a follow-up question. I think it'll be a good, so he said, Paul just mentioned standardization. One of the many merits of current TMF reference model is that it's adaptable to suit the specific needs of each organization. Do you have a feel about the extent to which the standardization through CDISC might impact that adaptability?
Yeah. So this is always the challenge, right? When you're trying to standardize something, there's a lot of benefits to standardizing, but at the same time, there's not one size fits all, especially with clinical trials. So I think that what we're trying to do, and here I'm sort of putting my CDISC hat on, we're number one looking to the CDISC team who's got a lot of experience in developing standards and building in flexibility to standards. Obviously, they're more on the clinical data side of things, but I think the same principles. So we're looking to them to see, okay, how do we build in flexibility? So that's one thing. And then I think the other thing is, up until now, and for the foreseeable future, you can choose, what you want to adopt. So within version 4 of the CDISC TMF reference model, we're still going to have artifacts. Those artifacts are still going to resemble very much what we have today. And we're going to have sub-artifacts, but those sub-artifacts are going to be formalized instead of being informal, which I think is necessary if we want to move towards digitization and better interoperability with all of the other clinical systems. And we're going to have standardized metadata. And we're going to sort of take a staged approach to the metadata standardization. We're going to sort of, first of all, define a core subset of metadata that's actually going to come from the various different software vendors that have established metadata standards. So we already had a meeting with a group of pretty much all of the software vendors that are in the TMF space in Arizona during the CDISC conference, and we agreed that we would collaborate together to come up with the initial standard. But even when we do that, and as that standard grows, we're still going to build in flexibility so that people or organizations can choose what they want to use. I do think that there will be certain metadata that will become mandatory, especially as TMF becomes part of the bigger digital data flow picture, because we have to have some rules. It can't be a free for all. And then finally, I think just speaking with various different vendors, the general consensus is nowadays most organizations do adopt the TMF reference model pretty much as is. And there's not a lot of people that are customizing it anymore. And sometimes they want to, but then afterwards they realize, well, I can probably make this work. And I think with sub-artifacts and the fact that we're probably going to be able to have more sub-artifacts over time, it's going to make it easier. So that's that's my position.
But that's it. But that's exactly why it's good to have that industry standard so that everybody can get on the same page and start from the same square.
Yeah.
So now we're getting to the ICH questions. Okay. We have question 5. So we're hearing a lot about about ICH M11 and TMF, and why is it so important, and how will it impact TMF?
So this is, I think I've already sort of started to speak about this. For those of you that don't know what ICH M11 is, it's a draft guidance and a draft standard for digital protocol. And it's really kind of the first standard that we're seeing emerge from ICH for and what we call an essential document. So the protocol is obviously probably the primary essential document. But I think that there will be other standards like this for some of the other core documents that we see within clinical trials. So things like, the clinical study report, for example, the statistical analysis plan, all of these things eventually, I think, will have digital standards. It's actually quite exciting for the TMF because when we think about TMF is all about documenting what happened in the study so that you can demonstrate compliance with regulations, with your SOPs, and with the protocol. And so all of a sudden, if we have a protocol in digital format with a lot of very structured information about study design, we can use it in two different ways within TMF. Number one, we can use it to extract parameters which will allow us to configure our TMF, configure our eTMF, our system, based on study design. So for example, in our protocol, if we say that we're going to have an interim analysis after 6 months of first patient, first visit within the study, then we know that we have to plan for an interim analysis. And so therefore we can create the entries in our expected artifact list for that interim analysis, and we can create the placeholders for the artifacts that we need to collect. If we need to collect, for example, artifacts around IP, so investigational products, it's important for us to understand, well, how many treatment arms are there in this study? And I can go and find that information from the digital protocol because it's very well defined. If there are, for example, independent data monitoring committees that are planned, again, that information is in the digital protocol. I know where to find it, and I know that I'll need to plan for artifacts for those committees. So there's a lot of information that can really help us drive what artifacts we expect to see in our study and therefore improve completeness. So that's one thing. The second thing is the ICH M11 digital protocol gives us it's like a table of contents. If you look at it, because a protocol has a table of contents, right? And so ICH M11 is built around this table of contents. So we have all of the different sections and subsections that we would typically see in a protocol. And so one of the exercises that we're doing within CDISC is we're planning on mapping the TMF reference model to ICH M11. So that when we load a digital protocol into our eTMF, we should be able to navigate our eTMF by all of the various different sections and subsections and areas of that protocol. So for example, if you have a randomized study, within the digital protocol, you have a section on randomization. And so if I navigate to the randomization section, I should then be able to see all of the artifacts that relate to randomization, if I have access to see them, of course. And so it allows us to drill in very quickly to a particular area of the protocol. Eventually, we'll also be able to run consistency checks on the information that we have and the digital protocol to see, do we have all of the information that we should have based on the study design and based on the digital protocol? So we can start to get quite sophisticated in evaluating compliance with the documentation of the execution of the protocol. So it's a very exciting thing. The other thing that's important about ICH M11 is that it's providing a foundation for digital data flow. So digital data flow is an initiative from Transcelerates, and that's being supported by CDISC to allow the interoperability and better flow of information to downstream clinical systems from one central repository that holds the digital data, that holds the digital protocol and the study design. So all of these systems are using the same version of the truth. And there's also a data model called USDM, so Unified Study Definitions Model, which encapsulates all of the parameters that we have in the digital protocol and that can be used and understood by all of these downstream systems, including eTMF. And so it means that in the future, it's going to be a lot easier to exchange information between systems that are compliant and compatible with digital data flow and USDM. And all of these systems are all going to be based on the same digital protocol and therefore the same study design. So it's really going to empower us to better meet the challenge that we had today with all of these various different systems that all contain TMF relevant information and that today kind of exist in silos. All of a sudden we're going to be able to connect up to all of these different systems and be able to easily exchange information with them to be able to provide a much more holistic picture of the study and also have a much better chance of having a complete trial master file ready for inspection.
No, and it's honestly fascinating to hear kind of the way the industry is moving towards that digital kind of aspect being more of a mainstay. I mean, that's the way the world is going, but it's nice to know that the industry is adapting with that.
Yeah, exactly.
And so for question 6, we got what are the things that you're thinking about most when it comes to ICH E6R3, its impact on TMF?
So I think the first thing is when's it going to actually happen?
Yeah, exactly.
When's it actually going to come out? Because obviously it's been a long time in the works. But no, that's kind of a joking aside. I was thinking a lot about this, and obviously there's a lot of discussion points on this at the moment. And for me, there are like 2 key things within ICH E6R3, which I think will have a big impact on TMF. The first thing is in ICH E6 R1 and R2, we spoke a lot about essential documents, So that was really we had that nice little section, 8.1, 8.2, 8.3 for startup, conduct, closeout, and like that list of essential documents. And everyone was like, well, yeah, they're definitely the essential documents, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff that we also need in TMF. So it wasn't always that easy to work with. But now in ICH E6R3, we're talking about records. And there's clear acknowledgement that records that we should expect to see in the trial master file goes above and beyond the essential documents. But those records may exist in other computerized systems, so other clinical systems used within the clinical trial. So there's kind of a broader scope, if you like, of what TMF should be, and then also this reference to records rather than documents. And I think that's important as we start to go towards data and data driven. And we move away from documents. It's important that the regulations are talking about records and not documents, because really what we're managing is records, records of what occurred in the clinical trial. So I think that's really encouraging. I know that there's a lot of discussion still on E6R3 and there's, there's 3 or 4 pages of text around records and TMF. Which is quite, much bigger than what we had before. And it's still in draft, of course, so it's not yet final, but I definitely think they're going in the right direction. And it's aligning with the direction that we're taking as an industry. The other thing that I think is super important is the focus on quality by design. And I also have a quality background, so I've got a sort of a data management background, but I've also got a quality background. I get really passionate about quality, so I think quality is super important. And the way I think about things is we have our quality system where we have all of our SOPs, where we define all of our processes, how we're going to conduct those processes, who's going to do what evidence do we need to produce. And this is, it's very well defined usually within our SOPs and work instructions within our quality system. And that's one thing. And then you have the trial master file, which is all about collecting and organizing evidence of what we did. But often there's no connection between the quality system and TMF. They live in 2 completely different spheres managed by 2 different groups of people. And that for me has never really made sense. I think that the quality system is the foundation of the TMF. So whatever the quality system says we should be doing, it should, we should be able to then trace back into the TMF and understand, well, did we do what we said we were going to do in our SOPs? The two things should be linked together. I think that once, at one point in time, we're going to have things like digital SOPs, which will allow us to digitally define the different steps of a process and the roles and responsibilities and the deliverables and the evidence, everything else, even the time frame. So that's something that we'll see in the future, which I think will help us drive, again, completeness of TMF. So what should we have in the TMF? So very similar to the digital protocol that tells us these are all the different processes that we're going to follow within this study, and these are all the parameters. If we had the same thing in our SOPs, in our quality management system, well, we could do exactly the same thing. We can derive TMF completeness and expected artifacts based on instances of those processes that are being executed in our quality management system. So coming back to quality by design is all about building in quality from the outset proactively into our processes. So if we had the ability to digitally define our processes and the different steps that we had to go through to ensure quality, then we can also within the TMF drive the production of the artifacts, and to produce the artifacts, we obviously have to perform the process. We have to follow the steps that are being communicated by the SOP. So I think bottom line, quality by design is a good thing. Quality should be proactive. It shouldn't be retrospective. It's quite what it is today. And I think that there's a really big opportunity for the community and for the software vendors and the sponsors and the CROs to start to think about, how do I connect these two things together? How do I define my processes in such a way that I can integrate it with my trial master file and drive the completion of the trial master file from those quality processes? And I think that, again, ICH G6R3 is kind of pushing us in this direction. And so I'm, again, very excited about that. I think there's a really interesting opportunity there for the industry and for the community to improve the quality of the execution of our trials through better integration between quality system and TMF.
And I think I'm going to start saying, I think quality by design is going to be your new catchphrase. I feel like this has been, this is, I think, the third approach that I had is State of TMF that I've heard you, mention it. And it's important. I think that's why, I think like we're really seeing the industry kind of go that way. Like I'm noticing even in my conversations, a lot more sponsors of CROs are adopting a quality system before they are, like an electronic quality system before they're adopting a TMF. Because I think you're right. I think that people are realizing that they really need to work in harmony. And if you have those processes in place, but people don't know how to actually perform those processes, it'll affect everything. Exactly. So here we go. We got question 6. So are there any common misconceptions about the TMF that you would like to address?
So I suppose first things is, it shouldn't be a repository. It shouldn't be an afterthought. It shouldn't be something, it's not just an archive. It's actually, it's a goldmine of information that we should be using in our day-to-day lives when we're managing our clinical trials. So stop thinking about it as an afterthought. Stop thinking about it as this thing that you just file away and then forget about. There's a lot of value in TMF, and we really should be exploiting it. So I had to switch to my very weak cellular still, but I think the internet, unfortunately, so I'm probably going to have to end there. But thank you very much, Danny, for the questions, and thank you to the community. The attendees for asking such great questions as well.
Of course, Polly, Luker, and again, thank you to the community. Thank you to everyone who attended. Apologies for that. This needs to be cut short, but as I said, we'll be having clips from today answering all those questions. And if there's any questions that you guys are putting in now, we'll be sure to give them to Paul and see if we can come up with some answers for you.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the State of TMF. If you liked today's episode, hit the subscribe button, view the full episode with video on YouTube, and follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook to see the sometimes entertaining and always resourceful content we post every single day. See you at the next episode.